John, thanks a million for coming. Appreciate it. So John, why don't you tell the audience who you are and what you did for 30 years?
Okay, my name is Jonathan Dover. I was in law enforcement for 31 years. 27 of those years were with the Navajo Nation. And I was a criminal investigator, had been to training in Glencoe, Georgia, at Federal Law Enforcement Training Center for that. I was an archaeological specialist doing crimes, one of only 2 in the Western United States. I was also a licensed EMT, the only uniformed officer that was ever licensed to do that before or since. And me and Stan, my buddy down here, we got assigned to investigate paranormal cases on the Navajo Nation lands. And we did that for 11 years. We didn't ask to do this. I like to say we were voluntold. But the rest is history. We investigated them just like any law enforcement case, with an idea that it was going to go to prosecution. And a judge was going to have to see it and a jury was going to have to approve of it. So we had to be 99.9% sure that what we were seeing out there and recording was the truth. That's why you get into law enforcement. You're after the truth. So we did that diligently until I retired in 2011. Stan is still working for the tribe as a senior investigator for another department. And so his work carries on. He's got about 100 cases behind right now from his predecessor. So in the meantime, I've been able to get on Skinwalker Ranch and Ancient Aliens. And just for everybody, I'm going to put a plug out right now. If everybody watches Netflix, Unsolved Mysteries, you will see me and Stan on there. It just came out on October 25th, right before Halloween, and it's an episode called Paranormal Rangers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, were there any parameters around, okay, you guys can do this, but you can't do this on your investigations?
We didn't have a mechanism to investigate paranormal cases. So Bigfoot cases went under wild animal complaints. We had to be very, just kind of make it up as we go along. And the cases were all locked down. Only we and the director of the Rangers had access to them. Since then, unfortunately, the system, the computer-aided dispatch and records management system, was overhauled. They put in a whole new system, and none of the information could be migrated over. But me and Stan, somewhere in our computer hard drives and everything else, still have copies of our cases.
Oh, thank you.
We just have to find them.
So the investigations, were they tribal or were they federal? Were they under BIA or?
They were all tribal.
Tribal?
Yeah.
So they belong to the tribe?
They belong to the tribe.
So are they publicly accessible?
No, they are not.
Is there some mechanism to see them?
One of the things that we did when we spoke to Navajo people is we guaranteed their anonymity. And to do that, we had to keep their names out of the reports. We even, in some cases, we kept the locations out of the reports because they were so fearful that, and it's really interesting, there's a cultural component here that people don't realize. Navajos, along with a lot of other Indian tribes, have a history of visitations by star people. And when we ask them, why don't you report these things to MUFON? They tell us if we report those, then a whole bunch of people are going to come out here and the visitors will no longer come here. And we don't want that, because to them, these are deities.
When you say a deity, what does that mean?
Their star people are people who have come to the Navajos and other Indian tribes to impart knowledge.
So are they considered friendly?
That's hard to say. I'm not going to commit to that one way or the other. We've seen a little bit of both. And we've seen so many different types of craft up there. I have personally seen cigars, saucers, triangles, squares, pill shapes, orbs, and in one case I got followed by one for over 40 minutes while I was on the road at 2 in the morning. So I thought about turning around, and I thought the consequences of doing that might not be very good, so I just kept going. There's a lot of stuff going on, at least until I put a camera in my window. And then now I don't see them anymore, and I'm okay with that.
So let's start going down the line. Cattle mutilations.
We don't have a good handle on cattle mutilations. The reason why is our land up there is open range. So unlike other ranchers that have a fenced area and they can keep an eye on their cattle, our cattle just run all over the place. And when it comes auction time, you go out and try to find them, which is a whole sport all by itself. Then when you get them rounded up, you have to make sure you got the right brands on them, or maybe you don't. And then you get them to the market, and hopefully the state brand inspector will pick it up if it's got a different somebody else's brand on it. Usually the animals are not checked every day. So we'll get a case of a dead cow maybe a month after it happened, and there's no information there.
Did you ever investigate some of those classic mutilations where the area around the lips are gone, the anal cavity's gone, no blood, etc.?
We'd heard of a few of them, but we never got to investigate any.
Okay. And how about people reporting actual abductions by the deities? Would they ever say that?
They never actually said that they were abducted, but we had ground occupant sightings on several occasions.
And you'd write those up?
We're in the process of writing those. Yeah, those got written up, but we're in the process of writing a book.
Okay.
Or 2 books, actually.
Okay.
And so we're working on it right now. I'm about 1/3 of the way through the book. And those cases, without the names and the locations, will be talked about.
And Bigfoot, is that related in your world to the deities?
Bigfoot is related sometimes to the deities, and more often they're related. What we've seen is correlations in UFO case increases when we have Bigfoot increases. And we have a lot of cases involving Bigfoot. Also, and just for everybody's information, we have Navajo skinwalker cases. Those cases, we found out through interviews, can be mixed up either way. It could be talking about a Bigfoot and then turn into a skinwalker case, or vice versa.
So at Skinwalker Ranch, there was a story in the book written by Colin Kelleher and George Knapp where the researchers were on the property and they saw like a window frame above a pasture open, and a Bigfoot type creature crawl out, fall onto the pasture, and run off. Now, when you talk about what John D'Souza did in my movie, where parallel dimensions, and I've heard you talk about this at Skinwalker Ranch, is that Bigfoot in your world or in your beliefs coming out of a parallel dimension down into ours? And if that's the case, what's the mechanism for it to go back to their dimension?
We've actually investigated numerous Bigfoot cases. We've seen some where we've tracked it. from the location where the sheep was stolen or whatever. 5-foot strides, heel to heel. Good deep impressions, 21-foot or 21-inch footprints. Went up a hill, 45-degree hill. Me and Stan had to crawl up on our hands and our feet. It just walked up that thing. We tracked it for essentially over a mile, and the tracks disappear in trackable ground. Now, me and Stan are both trackers. We're what you call combat trackers. So we track bad guys. And, you know, to this day, I don't deer hunt, I don't elk hunt, because they say that once you've hunted man, there's nothing else that's exciting. So I've hunted man my whole career. And the tracks just disappear almost like the thing was jerked up into the sky. So we turn around and track the other direction, track to where it came in. Same thing, the tracks just appear in trackable ground. I've had that occur on a couple of different occasions where I've tracked it. And you're just sitting there scratching because you start spiraling out, you're looking for sign. You're looking for stuff like even a pebble pushed into the ground to find that track, and it's not there.
Have you ever had a tribal member say that they were watching one and saw it disappear?
I've interviewed a couple of tribal members that had said that, but they were with different tribes. And they said that they had personal encounters with Bigfoot. And they said that one guy said that he was watching it by a tree, and he says it just faded out and disappeared.
So in your world of the Navajos and their belief system and their elders, what would the elders say happened there?
The elders tell us never to look Bigfoot in the eye, because he can take control of your mind that way. Now, this is what medicine men say. We think, and this is just speculation, this is our opinion, but we think that Bigfoot uses infrasound. And this is sound that you cannot register for the human ear. You can't hear it, but it still affects you. So we've seen a lot of things out there, UFOs just disappearing, just fading out and disappearing. UFOs that are popping into existence with a pop so loud that it'll go through people like a physical force. And they come and tell us they're not believers in UFOs, but then they looked up in the sky right above their house and there's one sitting there.
Okay, so hold on. In Missing 411 The Hunted, there's a man, 80 years old, and he's hunting with a series of men that are separated about 100 yards apart. One of the sounds that the person heard was this clank or pop sound. And they could never say for sure if it was related to the man missing, but it was one of those odd sounds they heard in the woods that they couldn't correlate to a normal sound in the woods. So now what are you saying about that sound?
Our speculation is that these things are popping into our plane of existence from a parallel or another dimension. And they're arriving here. We think that maybe they're generating so much energy to do this that they only have a certain amount of time. And then they just fade out or they just disappear. We think Bigfoot is exactly the same way, that he can step in and out of dimensions. He is a pan-dimensional being, and that he can walk in and out when he pleases.
Would any of the elders believe that Bigfoot is related to the UFOs?
I believe so. Bigfoot goes back to the late 1600s with the Navajos. They have a story in a place called Coyote Canyon, north of Gallup, where they saw a Bigfoot. By that time, Indians had horses and they had rope lariats made out of horsehair. And they rode around this thing and they roped it. And they said it sat down on the ground and they could hear it talking to them in their own language. And it said, I didn't mean to disturb you. I'm going north up to Mesa Verde area. And if you'll just let me go up there, I will not come back and bother you again. So they rode with it between them all the way up to Colorado. And they released it up there. So that's the story that the medicine men tell us of incidents involving Bigfoot.
So you brought up Mesa Verde. So you opened a can of worms here. So I did a special for the History Channel called Vanished. Anybody see that? Oh, perfect, thanks. So in there, we talked to some national park people. And we said, what happened to all the people here? They couldn't explain it. They said all these people had a good existence, they had good food, they were living in the cliffs. One day they were there, the next day they were gone. Any thoughts about that?
The Navajo have an origin story that says that they started in a world of darkness. They went into a world of light that had insects. And then they went into another world that had aquatic animals. Another world had monsters, giants. And they saw a hole in the sky. They put a couple, they say reeds, but I'm thinking some kind of structure against this hole and climbed up these reeds into another world. And they came out into this world, which is called the Shining World. So in a place called Dineta, which is the emergence place. So the Navajos have said that, and a lot of other Indian tribes in the United States and Canada, and we're talking over 570 tribes in the United States and a like number in Canada, and First Nations, have similar stories that they came from somewhere else. So when we started to look at this, we reinterpreted that with the idea that they may have come through dimensional gates to the present world. And it kind of holds up with everything that we're seeing.
Interesting, because what you're saying matches up with what Harvey Pratt and I did for several years when we visited multiple tribes and talked to them about their belief system of Bigfoot. One thing, we never met a tribe that said that they thought Bigfoot was an ape or a gorilla. Nobody ever thought that. But they thought that it was a spiritual being that lived in multi-dimensions. And it could travel back and forth. And when it was here, it was flesh and blood. But when it left, there was nothing. And then they also walked into that topic of star creatures and believing that the people came from the stars. And the one thing that I have a difficult time with researchers that call themselves researchers is discounting the beliefs from 560 tribes that essentially all say the same thing across the US and Canada. And there's some shows on TV that I don't think give enough credence to what you're saying, especially from somebody who's lived there and done it from a pragmatic point of view, from a trained investigative professional like you and Stan. Now, when you were on Skinwalker Ranch, something that struck me is you were on a rock formation, and you said this was an evil place. Was that the word you used?
Well, to put it in context, we looked at that place, and to me, it was a place of religious service. They were holding ceremonies there to keep back what they perceived as evil on the ranch side. And so this was kind of like an outpost location to hold prayers in, to stave off what they perceived as evil. Didn't mean it was evil. It just means that that's what they thought it was. But it's kind of interesting that when the team left there, the reason, I'll let you explain the reason they left, that they said it was demonic.
So it's no big secret is that the government officials left there claiming that it was demonic. What did you think about that?
I think we tend to interpret things based on our backgrounds, and we look at things through that window. We grew up in a religious country. You know, Martin Luther came over here, he wanted religious freedom, et cetera, et cetera. The powers that be actually divided up the Indian nations in the United States into spheres of influence that the Catholics could have, the Mormons could have, Christian Reform, all the other religions, all claimed part of the United States as their own. And Native American tribes are the only people in the world that have to give up their culture to be a Christian. And, you know, to me that's sad, because we have a vibrant, living culture that's disappearing even as we speak here. The language is going, the traditions are going, and I think that I can be a Christian and still have a culture.
So you just watched my movie. The explanation about German elk hunters in a specific region, and there's no other nationality other than German that are missing, no other hunters other than elk hunters. Now, when you and Stan have investigated criminal activity and things, I realize that certain tribes have a lot of crime. And I'm not talking about crime. I'm going to rob you. I'm talking about really unknown type disappearances like I've explained here in the movie and in my past movies. Have you guys investigated disappearances on your land that may parallel what I'm talking about in the movie?
Well, unfortunately, the Rangers are doing resource law enforcement. We're doing the forestry, the game and fish, mines, minerals, water resources, search and rescue, that kind of stuff. We do get involved in search and rescue operations. When it comes to the investigations, the police take over that. The Rangers, at the time I was there, only had about 15 officers. Navajo police had about 250. And they have a dedicated criminal investigation unit. So we would defer to them, to any investigations. And once we were done, we were so busy, we never follow up on any of those. We've got enough work to do without following up on cases. And it's one thing that I found out in police work when I was at Winslow. If you follow cases, you tend to get frustrated because people don't go to jail. They get released the next day. So you just kind of take it as I did my job, the person went to jail, I did my paperwork, my job's done. Whatever the judge does, whatever the jury does, that's up to them. And I'm not going to worry about it.
So you also investigated livestock crime, right?
Yes.
So were there any cases where there was, say, a pen of sheep and unexplainably, say, part of that group just disappeared?
What we had was Bigfoot attacks on sheep. We had one case where the sheep in the corral were literally grabbed onto, and from the collar, the skin was pulled off. And to put that in perspective, one of the things that trained engineers fear is to hit a flock of sheep, because the wool is so tough and the skin is so tough that it'll wind up in the trucks and the train will derail. That's how tough that skin is. And yet this thing just ripped the skin right off the back.
Did you find tracks inside?
The rangers that investigated that case didn't report any tracks, but they weren't looking. They were just taking the animal damage complaint. But they came back and spoke to us about it, and they were just completely perplexed.
Are there any predators that could have done that damage?
Absolutely not. Not even a bear.
So what would your result explanation to that community be?
We think it was a Bigfoot because we were getting reports of Bigfoot all through that area. Hunters have encountered them. They've shot at them. We had so many reports, our department had an unofficial no-shoot policy because we didn't want our officers seeing something and shooting at it and finding a guy in a zipper suit. So we said, no, absolutely not, unless it's attacking you or attacking somebody else, you will not shoot at it.
So the sheep that were attacked, was there actual predation to it? Were they eaten or?
I believe some of them had disappeared.
Oh, some had.
Yeah.
What's the feeling of the owner? Do they have, if it's a Native American, do they have some knowledge that this may be a Bigfoot?
A lot of the Navajos already are very aware of Bigfoot, and to them it's just normal. They have this idea that Bigfoot exists out there, it lives out there occasionally, and it's heard and seen, but you are not to have anything to do with it. You just leave it alone, let it on its own. Now what's happening is we're seeing people going out there searching for Bigfoot. And we don't know what the result of that's going to be. But with all the TV shows coming out, we figure that somebody's going to run into one and it's not going to turn out well.
Was there ever an incident of in your knowledge, not directly meaning you investigated it, but had you ever heard of from another investigator where Bigfoot attacked somebody?
We had, Stan investigated one case where I think it was one or two girls got off the bus at the bus stop, and they live a quarter-mile away from the bus stop, so they walk home on a dirt road. And on their way home, a Bigfoot came out and chased them. And so you imagine being a little child and just running from this monstrous, hairy thing. They got home, and the brother was home, and they told him, you know, what had happened. He ran out the front door, and he saw it. So, and then it took off.
So no actual contact?
Yeah, some contact
Some
there.
contact.
Yeah. And we had another one that was reported. This one is real interesting. One of our jails, the jails are from the 1960s. So no ventilation system, just old-fashioned jails. And they're supposed to get all destroyed. Some of them were shut down. But they had a drunk tank in there, and the prisoners were all in there sleeping it off late at night. The jailers opened the back door to the building so that air can come in. And one of the jailers heard screaming from down the jail. And so they went down there to investigate, and all the prisoners were into one corner of the cell, as far away from the bars as they could get. And they asked them, you know, what the heck's the matter with you guys? And they said either a skinwalker or a Bigfoot had come in. They said it was covered with hair and stood there at the bars looking at them, and then walked out the back door.
That would be punishment enough.
I would have given up drinking.
Yeah. I'm guessing that there was no cameras.
No. This is probably late 80s when this happened. Officers out there, they don't have camera systems. They don't, even to this day, most of them don't even have body cams.
Oh.
Me and Stan were carrying little recorders on us, body cams, since about 2008. But we had to buy our own off of eBay.
Wow. So getting back to Skinwalker Ranch, they left because their belief is that it was demonic. You kind of attributed that to a belief system that maybe that's what we were bred with, learned through life.
Right.
So if you just take off that word demonic, what is it?
I think it's pan-dimensional beings that are coming through, that there's a portal or a gateway there to another dimension. And one of the things that me and Stan have been talking about is if you look at Nikola Tesla, he had this thing about the numbers 3, 6, and 9. He gave each one an attribute. He said 3 represents energy, 6 represents frequency, 9 represents the vibration. And if you have all 3 of those, he says you can do anything. So I started thinking we have energy at Skinwalker Ranch, right? They've said that the ground is conductive. It's like a battery, or it could, in my view, it's a capacitor. A capacitor is an electronic device that can store energy and under certain situations release it suddenly. They have frequency, 1.64 gigahertz, that they've seen over and over. But they don't have the vibration yet in order to manipulate whatever it is that's out there.
So let's say that you and Stan were assigned to investigate there. Since you've already been there, have you ever left and had that hitchhiker effect? Something follow you home?
I have not. And I attribute that to prayer and smudging. We do that after every case. We do that, like tonight, I'm speaking about this subject, so I'll be smoking myself tonight after I get back and saying my prayer for protection.
And smudging is?
Smudging is using sweetgrass or cedar or sage, white sage. And they're finding out that these smoke has a microbial effect. But you take that smoke and you put it over you and you cover yourself in the smoke. And when you're praying, you're basically asking for protection, but it's with an intent. So it doesn't work if you just go through the motions. You can go into the most fanciest church and kneel down and put your hands up, and it's not going to have any effect. You have to have the intent that that thing is going to do what you need it to do, and that's what we do. So I've got my little smudge kit back at the place, and me and Stan are going to smoke ourselves.
So this isn't meant to invade your privacy. This is, and if you don't want to answer it, please don't answer it. Just say it's private. But for my own knowledge, is this a prayer to Jesus Christ, to God, to who?
It can be, most Native Americans pray to the Creator. I am born-again Christian, so I pray through Jesus Christ. But it's the same thing. You have that prayer, you have the intent that it's going to protect you. And Native Americans, they don't want us to use that part of our culture because it's seen as something that's savage, something from the past, and you're not supposed to hold on to the past. But you see the Catholic Church with the priest with the urn,
right,
blessing people with
yes.
that. A lot of different religions all over the world use smoke in their ceremonies. So I don't see anything wrong with that.
To that point, when we did Vanished, Harvey did a ceremony with us where he used sweetgrass and he brought it around the room and brought it around us so that we were protected when we went out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I understand that. And I wonder if anyone who has been victimized by that hitchhiker effect hasn't come to somebody and said, hey, how can I protect myself and my family from this? Because it seems like it's, when you read the books that Knapp and Kelleher have written, it's had some serious side effects to those people. I wonder if anyone who's ever done that has still had that hitchhiker effect.
The Navajos have a term called hojo. It means balance. It recognizes that there's evil in the world. It recognizes that there's good. It says that there has to be a balance between the two, and you have a social responsibility to choose to be good, not to go over that evil side. I find that very refreshing because unlike other places where they say we have to eradicate evil, it recognizes that evil does exist. And it just says you have to be balanced. And that's what we're trying to do with smudging, is we're trying to maintain that balance in our lives. So it's helpful. It really does help.
Jonathan, the first time I ever heard you speak and heard a stand, I immediately thought you were an extremely credible person. And the way you present yourself and the way you handle yourself, you are a great representative to your people. And I hope that you continue to have a venue to get these words out. And I'm very blessed that you came tonight, and I appreciate you talking to us.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me. Just for everybody's information, when I got here, Dave had contacted me through email, and he said it's a Western cowboy type dress-up thing. And he says, so just so you know, and I says, oh, great. I says, me and Stan are going to come as Indians. So it's okay because we're used to being surrounded. And, you know, we came as ourselves. So.
Thank you very much.